ITV नेटवर्क के फाउंडर और संसद में मेरे साथी कार्तिकेय शर्मा जी।
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Initial information suggests that all of the 49 people on board a Russian plane that has crashed have died after the wreckage was found in flames in the country's far east. The Soviet-era plane was nearly 50 years old, with children among those on board. The Kremlin says a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky is unlikely before the end of August. Deadly drone strikes have been reportedly launched from both Russia and Ukraine following the conclusion of peace talks in Istanbul. Thailand has recalled its ambassador to Cambodia and will expel Cambodia's envoy following a landmine incident that injured a Thai soldier near their disputed border, according to the Phao Thai Party. The Thai Foreign Ministry has filed a formal protest, alleging the landmines were newly deployed. Israel says it is assessing a response from Hamas on the recent ceasefire proposal amid continued military action in Gaza. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has said that Gaza is facing a man-made mass starvation after a warning from over 100 aid agencies. Britain and India are set to sign a landmark free trade agreement during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, cutting tariffs on whiskey, cars and textiles, while expanding market access. The deal, finalized in May after 3 years of talks, marks the UK's biggest post-Brexit trade agreement. EU member states have approved a $109 billion package of counter-tariffs on US goods, set to take effect from August 7 if ongoing trade talks with Washington collapse. According to media reports, the move marks one of the EU's strongest responses to US trade pressures. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with top EU chiefs in Beijing, kicking off a summit set to be dominated by trade and the Russia-Ukraine war. China has sought closer ties with the EU amid global trade tensions over US tariffs. Columbia University has reached a deal worth over $220 million with the Trump administration following months of negotiation to restore federal funding. Columbia has been involved in a feud with Trump over alleged anti-Semitism on campus. Major international news agencies, including AFP, AP, and Reuters, and the BBC are urging Israel to allow journalists in and out of Gaza, citing growing fears for the safety and survival of their staff. In a joint statement, they warned that local reporters face not only the dangers of war, but now also the threat of starvation. With Gaza under total blockade, foreign journalists are barred from entering, and those inside face worsening conditions. Over 200 journalists have been killed since the conflict began in October 2023, according to Reports Without Borders. AFP has highlighted the dire plight of its staff in Gaza, many of whom are struggling to feed their families. The agency has managed to evacuate some employees, but many remain trapped. Meanwhile, Israel accuses Hamas of exploiting aid and manipulating reporting, while international watchdogs say journalism in Gaza is at risk of extinction. Now we are joined by Ali M. Abushbak. He's a Middle East researcher joining us live from Cairo. Now, with more than 200 journalists killed since the conflict began and growing concerns for those still trapped in Gaza, what steps should the international community take to protect press freedom and ensure the safety of journalists in conflict zones, particularly when access to information is severely restricted, according to you, Ali?
Thank you, Suma. The thing is, there is no freedom of press in Gaza during the beginning of the Israelis' war in Gaza. So it's over more than 200 journalists have been killed, and more than 300 civilian of journalists has been assassinated by Israel, and deliberately targeted by Israelis airstrike, and threatening the civilians who's leaking the information from ground about their active, as well as Israel have been also with Meta company and other social media companies. They are shut down the Palestinians' social media accounts that it's suppressed the Palestinians' voice. So the thing is also Israel doesn't allow for the foreigner news agency to let in Gaza and to cover the situation, a miserable situation in Gaza, while the international community protect the journalists to work during the war and to protect them for recording and covering the situation from the ground. So Israel is acting like above the international community and the morale of international community, targeting the civilian as well as the journalists. And we have witnessed several of journalists killed during the live stream. So that's it's referred to the how Israel acting and treating with every Palestinian, either they are armed or unarmed, and claiming that they are a participator in and they are a member with the Palestinian militant group. And this is a fake news and propaganda, justifying their killing and justifying the bloodshed of the journalists. It's unacceptable because they are covering the situation and they are showing what is happening on the ground. And the main question is why Israel, with every war in Gaza or round of conflict, doesn't let the journalists or foreign journalists to cover the situation on the ground. We have witnessed in 2008 and 2012 and 2014, 2021. So Israel deliberately targeting any voice sharing the information from the ground and any voice telling the truth about the suffering of the civilians and the casualties on the ground. So I guess the Associated Press urge to let their foreign journalists to enter and cover the situation in Gaza, that maybe make Israel in embarrassed situation, because when they will cover and they will see the horrific of the war and the starve of the people, especially, and we are talking about the journalists who faint and fell down during their covering situation because of the famine in Gaza, and they are suffering from the hunger during their coverage, the situation and the miserable situation on the ground.
And Ali, now, while international watchdogs warn of the risk of journalism's extinction, how do you balance the need for secure reporting in war zones with the concerns over the potential for biased or manipulated coverage?
Osuma, that's the significant question. Why Israel doesn't let the foreign journalists to cover the situation, and they will be definitely objective. They will not be subjective like the Palestinian journalists to cover the situation, because they belong to this area and they are have aware about the suffering. So maybe they will call it subjective coverage of the situation on the ground by doesn't let the international journalists and foreign journalists to cover the situation. It's a huge question. First, second, Israel is targeting everyone. And we have watching the kitchen ward, the kitchen ward in Gaza. Israel targeting several of them, and also in UNRWA and also United Nations faculties. They are targeting everyone who's working in Gaza. It's not only about the journalists. It's about also the human rights institution. It's about also the service of, sharing the food for the people, like a charity, kitchen charity. Israel have been targeting several of kitchen charity in Gaza. So that's make it more miserable. Israel is acting like above of the international law, above of the morale of war. So which make it more complicated, the situation on the ground. While the people who's the only suffering, the people who are the only casualties of this war, civilians who's unarmed people who's the only casualties in this war between Israel and Hamas.
Thank you very much, Aliyam Abushbak, for always letting us know what's happening on the ground all the way from Cairo. Now we move on to the next news. The European Union has stated it has no immediate plans to introduce additional countermeasures between now and August 1st against the US, but remains prepared for all scenarios. According to reports, EU has emphasized ongoing intensive engagement with the United States focused on finding a negotiated solution to the tariff dispute. This comes after EU member states approved a 93 billion euro package of counter tariffs on American goods. The measures would take effect on August 7th, but only if ongoing talks with Washington fail to reach a deal. The package includes 21 billion euros worth of earlier planned tariffs. Now we're joined by Dr. Boni Yushi Liao. He's an assistant professor of diplomacy and international relations at Tam Kang University in Taiwan. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. What are the key factors that could either resolve or further complicate the tariff dispute between these two economic powers?
Yes. Hi everyone. This is my first time here. I've been following the EU-China relationship like a Netflix political drama. And this latest season has twists and backstabbing and awkward phone calls and even some surprise cameos. So the recent 25th EU-China summit in Beijing, that was not just another photo of with smiling handshakes and harmless press releases. So behind the curtain, I think the mood was tense. And then came Ursula von der Leyen, no filters, no fluff. And she basically told China, hey, we've got a trade problem, and pretending otherwise won't fix it. That's Brussels speak for we're done being polite. So, is it okay if I go on, or would you like to add something else?
Yes, I would like to ask about EU and US. So EU has approved 93 billion euro package of counter tariffs, but these will only be enacted if talks with the US fail. So how likely do you think it is that a negotiated solution can be reached before the August deadline?
To be honest, I am not that optimistic because, if China is included, so let me break it down. China keeps talking about open markets, right? And EU, I think Europe do need another market while things are pretty tight with the US. And they want a win-win partnership, at least on China's side, and no decoupling. So that sounds nice, right? But it's kind of like a friend who always promises to split the bill. Maybe America is doing the same thing and then forgets their wallet and every single time. So European business are still struggling to enter the Chinese market while Chinese electric cars and solar panels are flooding ours. The Europeans like a flash sale with no off switch. So that's not a partnership. And I don't see how that would be a substitute in between Trump's tariff issue. So that's a clear spin. And with, Li Qiang just visited Brussels and had a phone call with von der Leyen. And I don't see how it's going anywhere because I think I was supposed to talk about the EU and China issue, right? So I don't see how it's going anywhere because after the summit, after the phone call, Van der Leyen pushed for something called a trade diversion monitor mechanism. And basically what she wants is to keep track of the Chinese exports sneaking into Europe now that the US has slammed the door shut. But that's a smart move, really. It's like putting security camera at your front gate, but you know someone's about to show up with a truckload of suspiciously cheap batteries. But meanwhile, Beijing is doing what it does best: is smile, nod, and keep things vague. Okay, and I think Beijing is also waiting for the whole the U.S. tariff thing, and we're all waiting for to see how it landed. And well, I'm from Taiwan, okay, so we're doing the same thing, and we're playing like a quiet partner here, also waiting, and it's not really looking good on my side. Okay.
And Dr. Boni, now, what would be the broader economic impact on both sides if the tariffs go into effect?
You mean China and EU?
No, I mean on EU and US.
US, okay.
Yes.
Well, just when things were getting uncomfortable here, well, here comes Trump marching back into the room like it's like 2018 again. That's how he acts, waving his terrorist sword and shouting. And so it's like shouting, let's make trade wars great again, right?
Yes.
At least that's what it feels to me. He's hitting China with more tariffs and maybe to EU as well, especially on electric vehicle and tech. So guess what? Now China needs another market too, like the EU. And I think eventually, okay, that's my guess. Eventually, EU will have to work closer with China, with the whole Brussels is stuck in between Team Chaos. Okay, by Team Chaos I meant Trump, and Team Control. That may mean Beijing. And America is saying join our trade fight, and China is saying don't panic, we come in peace. So this is for the Europe. Okay, this is meanwhile Europe is just sitting there and sipping lukewarm espresso, trying to stay calm, but quietly Googling how to survive the global supply chain meltdowns. And so this is where I made my guess that, well, I think Europe will have to, you know, calm down for just a little more, time and see how they are going to survive the supply chain meltdown, which brings it back to Taiwan, like what we are doing right now. We are sitting on our hands and still, well, the Taiwan look like a pretty solid plan B, right, to compared to China. It's really, as I realizing your loud, messy, you know, roommates might not be your forever flatmates, but you start texting that quiet, reliable friend, which is Taiwan, just to see if they've got an extra room. And that's the same, that would be the same for EU as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boni, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said Europe and China must make the correct strategic choices in the face of recent global challenges during a summit with top European Union officials. This comes at a rocky time in their relationship. The EU and China are marking 50 years of diplomatic relations amid thorny disagreements ranging from the EU-China trade deficit to Beijing's ongoing support for Russia's war in Ukraine. The event is the first in-person summit for Chinese and EU leaders since 2023, and more modest than initial plans for a two-day meeting in Europe. During the meeting in Beijing's Great Hall of the People, EU's von der Leyen has focused on trade disagreements and told Xi Jinping that as cooperation has deepened, so have imbalances. EU trade actions in the past year have targeted Chinese exports of electric vehicles, among other goods, and its officials have repeatedly complained about Chinese industrial overcapacity. Let's listen into what EU chief had to say.
We have reached an inflection point. Rebalancing our bilateral relation is essential, because to be sustainable, the relations need to be mutually beneficial. And to achieve this, it is vital for China and Europe to acknowledge our respective concerns and come forward with real solutions.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with Dr. Boni Yushi Liao. Thank you, Dr. Boni, for staying with us. Now, President Xi Jinping has emphasized the need for Europe and China to make the correct strategic choices. What do you think this correct strategic choices means here in this context?
Let's get to the bottom line that EU-China relations aren't collapsing, but they are not going through a rough patch like a long-term couple finally having that talk. We're not breaking up yet, but we're not setting boundaries and demanding more respect and maybe secretly swiping on Tinder to see who else is out there, okay? Like India, like Southeast Asia. And for us, for Trump, because Trump always plays a big role in it, he might just be the chaotic matchmaker, forcing EU and China to reevaluate everything. I think that's maybe what Xi Jinping is pointing out. And sometimes you need a bit of noise, like Trump, to realize what's not working so you can make it work. So my final thought is that Europe may look calm on the outside, but inside, Europe is juggling tariffs and trade dependencies and geopolitics like flaming sword. And the next chapter in this drama is going to take strategy and flexibility and maybe even a little sass. So let's just hope no one forget the popcorn. I'm sitting here to see what's going to happen because Beijing is doing what it does best, right? Europe companies still face confusing rules and unequal treatments and heavy dose of please give us your tech, but don't ask questions, right? So we've heard this song before, and honestly, the chorus is getting kind of old. So, I like to call where we're headed, the strategic decoupling with jazz hands. We're politely stepping back, okay? EU is politely stepping back and slowly setting boundaries, but still pretending it's all cool, okay? So I don't know where it's gonna take EU and China, somewhere, and I don't see a very, much of a strong bond despite what Xi Jinping may want to ask for. So it's gonna take a lot of time, but at least Trump, okay, plays this chaotic matchmaker part of him may shake things a little bit and make EU and China rethink how to cope together. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boni Yushi Liao, for joining us today and sharing your insight throughout our news. Now we move on to our next news. Tragedy has struck in Russia's Far East, where a passenger plane carrying 49 people has crashed near the town of Tinda in the Amur region. The Antonov 24 aircraft, operated by Angara Airlines, disappeared from radar while approaching its final destination. Hours later, a Mi-8 helicopter located the burning wreckage. Officials have confirmed there were no survivors on board, were 49 passengers, including 5 children and 6 crew members. According to preliminary reports, crew error during landing in poor visibility is being considered as a likely cause. The plane was flying from Khabarovsk to Blagoveshchensk and onward to Tinda when it lost contact. Russian authorities have launched a full investigation and recovery teams are working at the crash site. Now we're joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from Bulgaria. Thank you, Professor, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, to what extent does the use of aging Soviet-era aircraft reflect broader infrastructure and safety challenges within Russia, and could this spark international pressure for modernization?
Well, you said very correctly, Asuma, that in fact it's a very old aircraft. It's built 49 years ago, exactly, 1976. And a country that is in war for 3.5 years, obviously where the entire economy is militarized and is focused on military but not on civilians, one cannot expect anything else. So yes, you are correct that part of the problem in the Russian airspace are those old aircraft. And we hear that there were many calls actually to replace those aircraft, to modernize that technology, to have new aircraft, as not to jeopardize the lives of civilian people. So as much as I'm sympathetic to those who lost their life, they're absolutely innocent. There are children among those 43 plus people who died. My severe criticism goes to the entire system, up to the Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, for engaging in unprovoked, horrible aggression against Ukraine and abandoning everything else in Russia. Any civilian life in Russia could be in jeopardy because a country is fighting absolutely useless and murderous war. Every day Russia loses 1,000 people in Ukraine. And obviously for Vladimir Putin it doesn't matter. If he can lose 1,000 soldiers every single day for the last 1,200 days, he doesn't care about 43 extra lives lost today in an air crash. So my judgment is very clear. We have a war criminal, an aggressor, in charge of a country where every day they lose soldiers in Ukraine in 4-digit numbers. And for those people in Kremlin, 43 lives somewhere in Angara, in Blagoveshchensk, in the middle of the Siberian jungle doesn't really matter.
Thank you very much, Professor, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion. Russia has expressed concern over what it described as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's militarization of Germany. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has condemned Merz for his quote-unquote anti-Russian rhetoric and escalating relations with Russia. Here's what she had to say.
С ФРГ поддерживаются двусторонние контакты по дипломатическим каналам. Мы открыты к политическим контактам со странами по их запросу, если в этом есть какое-то практическое зерно. А что мы слышим, вот, например, от Берлина или из Берлина? Канцлер Мерц повышает градус антироссийской риторики буквально каждый день. Эта риторика его становится все более агрессивно воинствующей. И считаем, что выбранный или избранный им курс на эскалацию отношений с Россией параллельно с форсированной милитаризацией Германии повод для беспокойства, сильного беспокойства прежде всего самих граждан ФРГ.
This comes after Germany's cabinet approved a draft law on July 23rd aimed at accelerating defense procurement and construction on military bases. According to reports, the bill, which supports German efforts to meet higher NATO defense spending targets, also widens the definition of military needs to include civilian-related items such as medical supplies and construction materials. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Professor Veselin Popovsky. Thank you, Professor, for staying with us. Now, what are the potential strategic implications of this move by Russia, according to you?
Well, I hear very well what the Foreign Minister Zakharova, spokesman of the Foreign Minister, said. I understand Russian language, and it is absolutely ridiculous. You know, Russia is accusing Germany for increasing its military spending, something which Russia itself does for the last 20 years. And currently, Russia spends over 30% of the entire Russian budget on military because it is fighting an aggressive, unprovoked, useless criminal war in Ukraine. And just because Germany is trying to increase with less than 1% of its military budget and is talking about helping Ukraine, Russia suddenly wakes up and says, come on, Germany is militarizing and it is a threat to Russia. So this is an absolutely ridiculous statement because it has nothing with the truth. It's Russian propaganda. They keep telling this every day. They are trying to put all the blame elsewhere, but not on their own incompetent policy and murderous policy. They're those who are losing lives every day, as I mentioned earlier. Russia is losing soldiers. It is losing its economy. Their rockets and drones are burning every day in Ukraine, and those cost millions of dollars. And the population of Russia is suffering more than any other population in the world. German population are happy. They are not in a war. They don't care about a percentage of extra defense spending. But the Russian population is in a real misery because they have an economy which 35% of this goes not to children, not to hospital, not to schools, not on education, not on medical services, but on a useless warfare in Ukraine. So the only comment I can make here is that Sakharova is talking absolute nonsense here and blaming Germany for what every other country should do, defend itself, increase some defensive forces, and so on.
Thank you very much, Professor Vasilin Popovsky, for joining us and sharing your insight throughout our news. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.